This is one of the longest books I think I've ever read. Hey everyone, welcome back to Andrew's Wizardly Reads, and as always guys, I am Andrew. Today we are here to talk about The Wandering Inn, Volume 2. But before we get into that, please like this video and subscribe to the channel, as it does help the channel grow. And you can check the description box down below for links to all my social media, including information about my Patreon if you want to help support what I do here. I've got some great exclusive content coming out here. I'm starting to kind of do some deep dives into what's on the shelf, and that content is going to be just little informal shorts that I'm going to be posting to the Patreon, which you can get access to when you sign up. That said, guys, we are here to talk about Wandering Inn Volume 2 by Pirate Abba. I believe this is Fae and Fair, or Fair and Fae. I might have those. Anyway, it's Wandering Inn Volume 2. And guys, this is going to be, we're going to start with just kind of general thoughts, and then I'm going to move into not a full spoilers discussion, but I'm going to be talking about stuff that happens into it. So I will give you a chance to leave the video once we're kind of there. But just the general non-spoiler thoughts was, this was a very good book. It was long, but it was very good. And again, I did the audiobook, which is narrated by Andrea Parsnew, and she does an amazing, amazing job. I love all the voices she does. I love that. Me personally, when I did it on audio, I went from 1.5 to 2x, and I had no problems understanding Andrea at any time, and I thought she did a fantastic job kind of just making this come alive for me. So thank you, Andrea, for that. And yeah, I just like the evolution that we got in this entry. I liked the character growth. I liked the expansion of the world, because we get a lot of expansion here. And overall, it's very, very good. So if you're looking for a general statement of, do I recommend The Wandering Inn? Yes, I am going to be reading the entire series as it just slowly releases, and we get audiobooks and ebooks and things of that nature. I think there's a Kickstarter coming out sometime next year for a physical release of the first book. You can bet that I'm going to be getting that. I highly, highly recommend The Wandering Inn to people who love fantasy and lit RPG. And I've got my non-spoiler review of Volume 1, which you can watch there if you haven't done that. And yeah, we're going to kind of move into the review, which is going to be slightly spoiler-filled, because I'm going to be talking about certain character aspects. So if you are not caught up on the series, go ahead and read the first book, or watch my non-spoiler review of the first one, then read the first book, then you can kind of come back and watch this, because this is a very interesting series, because I don't think the 5-star rating quite applies to The Wandering Inn. It's a lot more complex than just a star rating, and frankly a lot of books are. But this is the one that kind of made me go, oh, I need to adopt something else. And I might be moving into a CAW a rating system moving forward, but I got to kind of research how that kind of works. But it's a lot more nuanced than just 5 stars. Like, again, it was 5 stars, but it's a much more complex 5 stars than just going, it was really good. Because there's stuff I liked, there's stuff I didn't like, but the stuff I didn't like, there's a reason I didn't like it, and I can understand why I didn't like it. Anyway, I digress, and I'm rambling. This might be a slightly longer review of a very long book. So let's just kind of strap in. And we're going to start off with atmosphere and setting. And basically, atmosphere is what The Wandering Inn does very well. And what especially happens in Wandering Inn Volume 2 is we get kind of, after the events of Volume 1, which we are moving into a kind of mild to mid-spoiler kind of discussion, there is a raid from a dungeon of the undead on the score. And so we lose a lot of characters. A lot of people die in that situation, and a lot of our characters have to deal with a lot of trauma. And that trauma is processed on the page. Like, what I love about this series is you can get into the minutia of characterization, and this does this very well. But basically, the atmosphere is, it goes bright, and it goes dark, and it goes foreboding, back to light, back to dark, and it moves through that very organically, and I really, really enjoy that. The setting here, we expand a lot more. But we go, and again, there's a lot of names. I haven't bothered to take any notes. This is all out of my brain. But the setting, again, is mostly around the score, but we are also exploring other cities, more human cities. We're going off into the high passes. We're going off into the blood fields. We're going off into all these different locations while, the Wandering Inn main storyline is happening in the score. So we really are starting to expand and pull back that world. So that was very, very cool. In terms of writing style, though, the way Pirate writes is so incredibly interesting, and I love it. Because Pirate writes in a way where it's taking real people who have real problems, who have real prejudices, who have real political views, and then ripping them out of this world and tossing them into this fantasy land with a leveling system and just beliefs and cultural differences and things that just don't mesh very well. We think we know how the world is supposed to work. We have our own morals, we have our own beliefs, we have our own culture that we've been raised in here in the United States or in Asia and Japan and in our world, but that doesn't apply to this fantasy world. And I just love watching how Pirate is able to make these characters interact with these fantastical creatures in these fantastical situations with an also just a lit RPG leveling system. I think that's very, very interesting. There's also a staggering of timelines. So we'll kind of be with one POV and we'll progress through, and then if another POV is involved in that scene at a different point, like at the beginning of that scene, the next chapter may be coming back to this POV and then coming back to where the plot diverges. And I really, really liked that. In terms of the plot is very interesting because essentially, again, we're dealing with the fallout of the undead kind of horde, but now we've got an undead necromancer, goblin lord that we're dealing with. We're dealing with Torin as he kind of gains sentience. We're dealing with Aaron and Ryoka as they discover that there are more people in this world than just them. They're using kind of magic to interact with like a cellular network to connect iPhones so they can cast a spell so they can join a group chat, which is kind of interesting. We're dealing with just all sorts of different political things going on within the Knoll tribes, and we're dealing with Lionette, and we're dealing with Lady Magnolia and Terriarch. We're learning about the Antinium and what the Antinium Wars were and how that kind of political and how the rest of the world kind of reacts to the Antinium because of what happened. We're then learning the deeper aspects of what caused the Antinium to flee their homeland. So all of that is packed into this plot, and it is beefy, it is big. We are just dealing with so much. We're starting to get into generals. We are starting to get a greater exploration of kind of the chess sub-story and what that kind of means. And are these characters aware that there are other worlds? We then get introduced to like ice fairies and how people deal with winter, which you would think is just like, oh, it's just winter. But it's a magical winter. Literally, it shows up just like that. We get to kind of explore Gazi and what her origins are. Well, not exactly her origins, but where her allegiances lie. It's fascinating. It's a lot of fun to explore those kind of things. And then if we're going to kind of talk about the intrigue and the plot and all of that, in terms of intrigue, it's very interesting because Aaron doesn't quite understand that Torin is evolving because Torin can't speak. Torin's a skeleton. So it was interesting for me to watch Torin kind of try and vent his frustration, and he does it through getting an attitude and stuff like that. But that leads to intrigue towards the end of the book, as well as we kind of learn that the Drake nations don't quite get along, and they squabble like General Silvertail's just like, hey, like there are bigger issues happening. We need to band together. And even though he's this lauded war hero from the Antinium Wars, he can't quite make anything happen. And he finds that incredibly frustrating. Erin is kind of, she loses the inn due to a mishap that, could not have been foreseen. And then she gets a new inn rebuilt. The Antinium kind of value Erin because while she plays chess and she has different cultural beliefs that interact with the Antinium to cause them to go individual, That's very interesting as well. I really, really liked that. So there's a lot of intrigue that is being set up in Volume 2 to then explode throughout the rest of the story. So I really, really enjoyed that. Now, in terms of logic and relationships, this is very, very interesting because logically, my brain says this is not how a fantasy book is supposed to go. This is not how fantasy characters work. And this is kind of where my biggest sticking point, or I think most people's sticking point, is going to be with the series. When I was first researching The Wandering Inn, I read a lot of reviews on Amazon just calling it woke. And I think that's an oversimplification and a misunderstanding of what the series is. And I mentioned it a little earlier where basically these are real people. These are us. Imagine you take all your political beliefs, all of your deep held beliefs, all of your culture, all of your religion, pluck it out of your desk chair or your couch or sofa or your bed, wherever you may be right now, and drop you into a fantasy world. And then you have those beliefs. So there is some mention of political presidential 2016 events in Volume 2, U.S. politics. And these people are literally arguing, but it's really all they have to grab onto. They have stuff that matters to them that's all gone. But when an individual is just dropped in and you lose everything, what do you hold to? What you need some anchor, some familiarity in order to function. And I think that's what Pirate has tapped into quite masterfully and very beautifully in this entry. So the logic that the characters don't act the way they are in a fantasy book makes sense to me because they are real people interacting with a fantasy world. And it's hard to drive that point home because people are difficult, people are stubborn, people are illogical, people don't act the way that they do in fantasy stories. And so to actually have a air quotes real person dropped into a fantasy world, I firmly believe this is how people would act. They would try and take their, because they're not anthropologists, they would try, or cultural anthropologists, I guess I should say, because cultural anthropology deals with, cultural difference. But that's not what these people are. These are just teenagers, young people who are very opinionated. I remember my early 20s, I was very opinionated. I was convinced I was right. And my political beliefs and all that were, of course I was right. I knew everything, which, obviously isn't true. Nobody knows everything. But I think we see a lot of that here in the logic on how it is executed on the page. These are real people doing real things in a fantasy world, and I liked that. In terms of relationships, I touched a little bit on Torin and kind of Aaron and the tension there, but I also liked the kind of change that we're seeing, the slow change, I should say, we're seeing in Ryoka. Because Ryoka is struggling with self-worth. She's refused to level, and now it appears she might not be able to level after the fairies interfere. And it's interesting because Ryoka is a very aggravating person, but I know people like Ryoka. I have interacted with people like Ryoka, and I can't say that even though Ryoka may not be my cup of tea, I think that the relationship and her growth is very, very interesting. I'm liking the evolution of Ceres and Kershaya. I love the interaction of Ryoka and Teriarch, as well as Ryoka's interaction with the Necromancer. I thought that was very cool. That whole plotline was fantastic. I really, really enjoyed that plotline. But man, it's so great seeing these characters kind of evolve, especially Rags. Rags gets a lot of story development here because, she started out as this kind of no-name goblin who picked up chess on a whim, and now she's like the leader of this great just horde of goblins. Now, she's not like Goblin Lord level, but she has conquered more tribes than I ever thought she was going to by Volume 2. I always thought we were going to see Rags grow, but she's grown a lot, and it's been very good to see. Garen, I think is his name. Garen is the big hob that she kind of bested or outsmarted. I don't know how I'm going to see that kind of story arc go, but I'm interested to see on how that evolves overall. Like, I mean, just the relationships and seeing how, like, you know, when Aaron has to turn Rags away on Mersha's behalf. Well, Rags understands even though she's frustrated by it. But at the same time, we get to see Aaron stand up to Relk and finally tell Relk she's tired of his crap and tell him to get out. Which I really, really enjoyed that, because Relk has been allowed to get away with a lot of stuff that I don't think most people would let somebody do. Aaron definitely gave Relk a lot of just leeway when it came to dealing with how he reacts around goblins in her presence. But again, there's also that cultural difference that, like, he doesn't understand why Aaron doesn't want these people killed. And is it a little irrational that Aaron wants to protect a bunch of goblins who have attacked her multiple times, who have bitten off fingers off of Ryoka and stuff like that? Yeah, it is a little irrational, but people are irrational. And so I thought that was very, very well handled. Enjoyment-wise, I really, really enjoyed Volume 2. It took me about 2 weeks to get through Volume 2. But, I mean, I did take a couple breaks to read some other things in that 2-week time period. But I still had a lot of fun with it. It's just such an expansive and immersive story. I can see why people just get obsessed and mainline this story. Like, if I didn't have all of this, I would probably just buckle down and consume just Wandering In. So it's fantastic. My enjoyment level is through the roof on the Wandering In. Despite sometimes, like, the whole girl talk romance scene with yeah, if you've read it, you know what I'm talking about. The whole mating scene of trying to find Aaron a mate. I could have done without that entire section. But what I think is done really well in that section is Aaron was just as uncomfortable as I was in the scene as I was listening to it. So I can kind of forgive it and move past it. It is what it is. Again, people do have these conversations. It is a real thing. And yeah, no, I get it. But let me see. Is there anything else I can talk about? Do I think the hype for Wandering In has lived up? Yes. I think the hype is real. I think the hype is well deserved. And I think the story is incredibly polished for as much as it is and as fast as it comes out. So far, like, I'm really, really impressed with the series, because Pirate seems to be able to put out novel-length chapters at this point. Like, I get Discord pings all the time that Pirates dropped another 100,000 words. But at the same time, I can bet you that those 100,000 words are super polished, and I find that incredibly, incredibly impressive. If I have to give this a rating, I'm gonna, I don't know, 4.5 out of 5. It's really, really good, but I feel like that does a disservice to the story because it's so much more complex than that. If you've watched this far and you agree with me, drop me a comment in the description box, or in the comment section down below. I don't know why I said description box, but let's have a good old chat about the Wandering In. Am I in for a treat in Volume 3, which I believe starts breaking it up into books. So I guess I should say Book 3? Question mark? I don't know. But yeah, let me know how you felt about it. Let me know if you liked this video. Would you like me to do more in-depth, more spoiler talks about The Wandering In? I am more than happy to do so. But that's all I really got for you today, guys. So make sure you check this one out. And yeah, till next time, peace out. Stay magical. Bye. And as always, I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons.